I was just thinking about sharing things that are relevant, and some of you may remember the great Methodist preacher David Pawson. I don't know if any of you do, but he told the story of how someone was wanting to see their next door neighbour saved, and he prayed to the Lord and said, "Lord, save my next door neighbour." And the Lord interrupted him rather rudely and said, "Do you believe I will save your next door neighbour?" He said, "Well, Lord, if I'm honest, no, I don't believe you'll save my next door neighbour." He said, "Well, why are you asking me to do it then if you don't believe it? Because what you believe, you shall receive." So he said, "Well, what are you saying, Lord?" "Ask me for something simple to happen." "Well, Lord, it would be great if I just had a conversation with my neighbour." The next day, the neighbour speaks to him over the garden fence. "I wonder if I could borrow your lawnmower. Mine's broken and I need to cut my lawn." "Oh, Lord," he asked. "We've had a conversation. What next?" "Lord, it would be good if we could actually just meet together." So when he brought the lawnmower back, he said, "My wife and I wondered if you'd like to come round and have coffee with us." "Oh, Lord, you're answering my prayer. What else, Lord? You want me to speak about you? An opportunity." When they go around to the neighbours for their coffee, "Now tell us, we notice every Sunday morning you go out the same time every week. What do you do?" "In the church." "Can we come with you?" "Lord, save my neighbour." And the neighbour gets saved when he comes to church. So as we've heard this morning, it's a growth situation. Pray within your beliefs. Don't pray for someone to get saved if you don't believe they will. I, this week, have been thrilled, as we've heard from Marcus, that the Lord asked us, Lynn and I, to go for a meal with the people at the top of our prayer list. We've been praying for them, well, at least I've been praying for them for the last month since I started the prayer card. So be encouraged that God does hear. And we had some God conversations while we were with them, and they were interested. So it's great. And I'll tell you one of the big things, do you know what? The Lord's given us £66,000 as a church just recently. What? You know, people are really interested when you tell them that sort of thing. So anyway, let me encourage you. Handing over to dear Marcus to do the next part. It's called the 5 Ps.
And because we're greedy, I'm going to give you 5 E's as well. So, greetings. So, this morning we talked about what we needed to do individually. This afternoon, and I'll cover the ground fairly quickly, there's a few planning tools for what the church needs to do congregationally in order to be able to make the most of its individual members having God conversations with people. So, first slide, please, Roy. Can I just remind you of some key things that we covered this morning? And for these three planning tools I'm going to give you, the first thing you have to look at is what is God already doing. Now, I know, and you know, that God sent the church out into the whole world to see the whole world become Christians. That's currently just shy of 7 billion people. You need to make a decision on where you're starting. Right, and even 7,000 people in the village of Staplehurst, that's a lot of people. And the danger with trying to reach everybody is you end up reaching nobody. So now, as a church leadership team, they recognised that because you're brilliant, you have hundreds of people using the building and knowing who you are and all these different groups. It's a mission field that's given to you. Of course, if you feel that God is saying there's another group of people that we've missed that we should be working on, we'd love to hear from you. I say we, I mean the church leadership team and Andy and I, because we're about helping you guys do it. So first principle, what's God already doing? You have all of these incredible people coming through your building. That sounds like God's already doing something. Second key principle, as we've talked about this morning and Clive's just illustrated so well, is you have to expect faith journeys to take some time. You want evidence that it's moving, but, Paul's Damascus Road conversion was years in the making. Why do you think Christians bothered him so much? What was he doing hunting Christians on the way to Damascus? It's because God had been working on him for a while. And when God speaks to him, he says, "Is it you, Jesus?" He knew who he was. God had been working on him. There's no such thing as a Damascus Road conversion, not even the original one. One of the key principles that you have to grasp while working as individuals and a church with people and having God conversations is to work out what that person's next step is. Because, if they're an atheist, asking them to come to hear to me preaching a full-blown gospel service and praying for the sick might be a bit too much too soon. Coming to a quiz night so that they can meet a bunch of people and realise that you're all lovely. Well, ish. So, more lovely than their neighbours. That's a good next. So, what's the next step? Events, and we'll talk about those in some detail. It's about supporting the evangelism. We need the culture of the church to be one where everybody's having God conversations with people. The church needs to provide a structure and a program and scaffolding in order you to be able to, for those people to be able to come into the community and be discipled. Because as we talked about before, Christianity is a team sport. My faith is it's a team event. And fundamentally, all of these models that we talk to are about discipling people. And it's a commitment to discipleship, but a recognition that it makes time. As 5 guiding principles, do they make sense? Questions, comments, insults? I'm pleased there was none of the third. Okay, next slide. Oh, please, Roy. Right. 5 P's for you. If we're going to, as a church, reach Staplehurst and beyond, you need a plan. Let me give you the 5 P's because it's not necessarily sure that's as clear as it can be. You need a plan, you need to prepare, you need to throw a party or two, you need to present the gospel, and you need a plug-in. 5 P's. So the plan is, who are we trying to reach first? Right? And we've already identified one of the key areas is the 300 people-ish that regularly use this building. What a fantastic mission field. Right? And as the cost of living crisis grows and some of those ministries build, it will, in the course of time, be nearer 500 or 600 people that are passing through the building. What an amazing mission field that is. And that's before you start talking to your neighbours and your colleagues and that super talkative, slightly annoying person at the supermarket. Does your supermarket have one of those? Oh, it's you. Right. So you need a plan, and broad strokes of plan. And then you actually got to prepare stuff. You have to make sure that your church is equipped. Thank you very much for being here to get equipped. You have to make sure that the scaffolding is in place. And you do some work. You need to actually make sure the stuff you're going to do is going to work well. And I'll come back to talking about preparation. It's the 5 E's. It's the last model I'm going to show you is this one. But the Bible is very big on planning. I won't spare you with the Bible study notes, but trust me, type the word plan into concordance, and it's scary the number of times it turns up. Not just God having a plan for us, but how we're supposed to have a plan to serve him. Third, is you throw a party. Well, at least what we mean is gatherings, but they're supposed to be fun. Right? Is that communities and families need gatherings and rejoicings. And as the church, as a centre of a community, you need to be able to gather regularly, and not just for Sunday mornings, but for other stuff. And when it comes for things like quiz nights and barn dances, and these are the kind of events that we are currently thinking around to be able to make it easy for you to invite people. So you have to have a plan. You have to have a party. Because a good party needs a plan, right? Otherwise you end up running out of wine and you need the Messiah to turn up and turn the water into wine. Fourth, you've actually got to present the gospel. There is no other name under heaven other than Jesus by which people can be saved. People need to confess with their mouth and believe in their heart. And in order for them to do that, you actually have to present the gospel. You need to do it well. You need to do it sensitively. You need to do it gently, often. There is a place for turn and burn, but I've never quite found it. But you have to present the gospel. And then most importantly, out of all five of those, you need a mechanism to be able to plug people into the life of the church. We're back to what's the next step. And to be blunt, you can do the first four really well, but if you don't think about the plug-in, you've lost. So, you need a plan, you need to prepare, you need a party, you need to present the gospel, and you need a plug-in. You need to work out what's next. Next slide, please, Roy. And actually, it looks like this. And it's worth recognizing that it is downwards. So the prayer and the work starts at the top end and then slides down. Okay, next slide, please. That was your first planning tool. I just want to mention my famous snakes and ladders thing again. Just north-south is people's relationship to Jesus. East-west is people's where people are in a relationship to Jesus. Can you jump forward 2 slides, please, Roy? Now, the dots, this is a random church. The dots are different people that are involved, and the ladders are the systems and the programs that you have to move people up and to the right. Now, when we did this exercise with you guys, you'll be delighted to know that bottom left-hand corner, which is people that aren't involved in churches and don't know Jesus yet, you had loads of ladders down there. And in that top right-hand corner, which is the people that are saved and are coming to church, you had lots of ladders in there. What you didn't have was anything to cross the two. There was this big gap, far too big a gap. So the reason that we're running barn dances and quiz nights and changing the format of the family service is to start to try and put ladders into that middle process. Because seldom do people go from anti-theist to born-again Christian overnight. Is you have to have the journey, and having tools and systems and programs that you can easily invite people to helps move them up and to the right. Is this making sense? Okay, let me just briefly talk you through the 4 areas because that's worth thinking about. Top right is where we traditionally think about discipleship machinery. It is for the saved, on behalf of the saved. It's equipping people for life. It's teaching you to pray, read your Bible, make the stuff of church work. It's fantastic. Traditionally, that's where it is. Bottom right is where people are regular members of the church or regular attenders but haven't made a personal commitment to Christ yet. My suspicion is you probably haven't got too many of those, but churches sometimes have. It can also be the fringe, the people that are here occasionally. And the reason they're here occasionally is they like the community, they just don't know about this God thing yet. So that's quite a useful fishing area, but it can be tricky. Bottom left is where we traditionally think of in terms of outreach. It is people that don't know Jesus, aren't in church, and you've got community fridges and warm spaces and all kinds of stuff going on down there, and that's fantastic. Top left needs a bit of thought. This is people who love Jesus, are still in a relationship to Jesus, but are no longer in regular church attendance. Almost universally, there is a sad story to why they're there, or their world has changed remarkably recently, and they haven't yet found something. So if you meet people in that category, gently bringing back and being aware there is a sad story. I just mentioned that at this point. Again, is this making sense? You are allowed to ask questions. Actually, this is supposed to be more interactive, but... Okay, next slide, please, Roy. And again, and the one after that. Yeah, one more. This is my five E's. Again, apologies, this is slightly too small for you. Any event, you need to think about 5 E's for it. I'll tell you what they are, then we'll go through them each by. The first is entice, how you attract people. The second is the entry, how people get in. The third is engaging them when they're here. The fourth is the exit. And then the fifth is extend. So, entice is your advertising. It's the why would people come to a quiz night? Why would people come to a barn dance? Why would people come to a family service? Why would people come to a carol service? It's understanding why people would come and what you need to tell them and how you need to tell them to get them across the door. So it's not just your publicity, it's making sure that your planning is in place in plenty of time. So my ordination is Elam Pentecostal. 15 years ago, when we moved our Bible college and headquarters into under the same roof, we promoted the Elam's director of principal of the Bible college and made him director of training. Because we worked out that we were ordaining ministers and then abandoning them to their own devices for the next 40 years. Not necessarily the world's greatest plan. So Nigel Tween, bless him, when he spent 3 years doing a lot of work with ministers to work out how he could train them. And he reached this startling conclusion that was brilliant and upset everybody. And it was this, that most churches in my movement, and in my opinion, most churches, they don't need more resources, more people, more volunteers, bigger buildings, better buildings, more anointing, better worship. They just need to be better organised. And while all of those other things are really helpful, if you're better organised, most of the rest of the stuff can come. People are much more likely to give if they think you're going to use it wisely. People are much more likely to commit if they recognise they're going to turn up and volunteer to do something and not end up standing in a corner not knowing what to do. Because they'll only do that twice. First time, they'll assume you're just having a bad day. Second time, they'll give you a benefit of the doubt. The third time, they won't bother. So I hate it because I'm not really a planner. I'm a preacher and an evangelist and a provoker of people and opinions. But planning is key. Thank God, he created planners and navigators and organised people. And if you're one of them, God bless you. In my world, in the church, you should wear capes and walk around with a sign that says superhero. So we've got to be planned. And we've got to be planned in enough time to be able to make it easy. But in that first thing for an event, it's why are people here? What information do they need? When do we tell them? How do we tell them? Some events, if you were giving away diamonds, I'd recommend putting a small sign on the door that said, free diamonds here on Tuesday, because otherwise you're not going to have enough left. Some things you're going to need, you want the world to know, but actually, do you want the world to know, or do you want the people that might come to know? So do you talk to them on Facebook? Do you give everybody an invite and say, go and invite your neighbour? Just be really intentional and be really clear when you're inviting people what it is they're inviting them to. It's a quiz night. Come eat, meet some of my friends from church. That's really important, because if they meet your friends for church, when you say, come to the carol service, because Clive and Lynn will be there, they're lovely, you laughed with them last time you were in. Oh, yeah. It's easier to come back to a place when you've been once before and you know people, particularly people that you discovered you quite liked, or at least didn't hate. The world is so desperate for community that actually, when they recognise it, it's really appealing and people will warm towards it. So you have to sort your publicity out. You have to do the enticement well. Does that make sense so far? Everybody happy with that? Okay. The next is the entrance to the event. So I tried to take my kids to a family fun day at a church not too far from me, and I couldn't work out how to get into the building. True story. I was like, and when I got into the building, I didn't know what to do or where to go. I couldn't work out whether I had to pay for the coffee or I was going to be given the coffee. I mean, it was a disaster. And you have to think about how the entrance works, how people are going to be able to find a building, right? And if you've got more people coming than you've got car parking spaces, how are you managing that? Are you saying to your church, please don't park in a car park unless you have mobility issues? We're leaving that for the guests. Or have you scrounged a car park somewhere else that you've got somebody waving people to? You just have to think about the stuff in advance. And then it's, okay, where do you need the welcomers? Do you need the welcomers in the car park, at that door, at this door? Do you need to escort people to their seat? Do you need to... But you need to have thought it through, and you need to have thought it through for I would recommend picking a handful of types of people, depending on who you might come. So on a Sunday morning, you might want to think about, how do we deal with a single mum with 3 small kids? Is different to how you deal with a very distinguished old couple with fragile mobility, right? How do you deal with the lunatic extroverts, and how do you deal with the people that are really nervous and want to come in? Because the extroverts will want 5 people to talk to. The introverted people, and God made plenty of both, will want to quietly sneak in and sit in the corner. You need good hosts to be able to do that, and there is a supernatural element to that gifting, as well as a practical one. But for me, the welcoming is, most churches, if you go to most churches and say, are you a welcoming church? Universally, people say yes. What they've done is they've answered the question I didn't ask. The question they answered was, do you feel welcome when you come to your church? Yes! Well, you wouldn't go back otherwise, would you? If you asked them to actually answer the question of, if a guest walked through the door, would they feel welcome? They're going to say yes out of pride. I can tell you horror stories of walking into churches. We were on holiday in southwest Wales, and we walked up to this church that we were going to visit. And as we got to the gate, the guy on the door warmly welcomed these 2 ladies that were coming in, and they were talking about the wedding that had been the day before. And he opens the door for them, and then they go in. And we got within 4 feet of the door, and he took 3 steps back to get out of our way. And we walked in, and I didn't know which door I'm supposed to go in, because they had 3. And he's just standing there looking at the floor. And I thought, this is not a healthy church. I'll spare you that. But actually, if you'd have said to them, are you welcoming? They'd have said yes. So it's worth thinking about it in some depth. We okay on this one? Does that make sense? 3 is engagement. You need to have a decent event. If you're going to have a quiz night, make sure you pitch it at the right level. Get an expert to come and do it for you. They've been paying attention. Just make sure the event is going to be engaging, that it is of a decent enough quality. If you're going to have a barn dance, you don't want Bob and his drum kit by himself and a mixtape behind. It's going to be a disaster. Just do the event well. And if you've planned it and you've thought about it and you know who you invite in and you know what events might appeal to them, then that makes sense. So just do good events. Don't be cringy. 4 is the exit. And actually, how people leave has a major factor on how they feel about the event. That's why you give bags to kids' parties, which have been, kids will go back and go, it was great. Actually, there's 3 kids in the room that couldn't behave, and it was slightly chaos, and nobody really enjoyed themselves, but they went home with a bag of sweets, and they're happy. As a hospital chaplain, I get sucked into some really weird medical conversations. I discovered something the other day. When you have to have a camera check out your insides, obviously there's only 2 routes in, right? And they do all kinds of surveys with people that have these procedures on how the experience was and how they could make it better, right? The lesson that comes, the thing that's said most is shorter the better. Are we making sense, right? We would agree with that. They found something really interesting. If they don't move the camera for the last 30 seconds, and then they take it out, people rate the experience as less horrendous as they would have done otherwise. Tells you something very profound about our experiences of an exit. So actually, don't just think about how people come in, think about how they go out. Think about the same process. Do you need to make sure and again, think about it in terms of groups of people. That couple with fragile mobility, you might want to make sure they make it safely to the car. The mum with the small kids, you might want to make sure that they make it to the bus properly, or just, be sensible. Thought about it. Make sure somebody's saying goodbye. Minimum, make sure somebody's saying goodbye. And often, if you've had an event where hopefully you've done the presentation bit, having somebody who's clearly on the door saying goodbye to people, that's often the person that people will ask questions to. And you want to be able to capture as much win to extend now, but you want to be able to capture that. And you need to make sure they're not the only person by the door, because when the first couple go and ask their 47 theological questions to decide whether you're sound or not, the three people behind them that need to know Jesus might just walk past because they can't ask the questions. You need to have more than one person by the door fielding those questions. The devil's not stupid. He'll send you a nutter to suck up all your time and attention, so you miss the three people that need to become Christians. So just think about the exit with as much care as you think about the entrance. And then the fifth E is, how do you extend the experience? We're back to what's the next step. So you want to make sure that you're collecting email addresses so that you can be giving people information on when their next type of event is. You want to make sure that you're inviting people to the next event. So people that come to the quiz night will be invited to an excellent evening of song and stories in the evenings of the 2nd of April. I know it'll be excellent because my wife's singing and apparently I can tell a story. But those invites will be on the table. And before the penultimate round, there'll be a music question for the quiz to get people thinking about musicals and go, oh look, I like music. And then Clive gets to get up and invite everybody to come to the music evening. Right? It's easy if you've thought about it. We're back to, and the Bible likes planning. But thank God, God invented planners to deal with the lunatic evangelists like me that just want to get on with it. So, but the more you can sensibly and gently give people the opportunity to be able to connect with you. And they need to feel like they've given the opportunity to connect, not like you're gathering names for a mailing list. Does that make sense? Or you're cannon fodder for the next meeting. So you need to be careful with it, but people need to have the opportunity to be able to address with you. The church that did the fun day that I couldn't find the entrance to, when I got in, I ended up talking to one of the other guests that had found the door. And this guy, he was clearly desperate for some community, but neither of us had figured out how we got onto the church's mailing list. I mean, I wanted to get onto the mailing list so that I could have a cup of tea with the vicar and go, mate, what are you doing? But he wanted to get onto the mailing list because he'd found somewhere that he could take his kids to that felt safe. Despite the fact it wasn't organised and he couldn't find the door, he was so desperate for community, he would have signed up. So make sure people know how to, but it doesn't feel like they have to. That's a really important balance. So, entice. Know what you're inviting people to and who you're after. Because different events, you need different events for different types of people. Entrance, think about the welcome, think about how people come in, think about how you get them settled and comfortable. Engagement, do a good event. Exit, think about how they go. And entice is extend, as in how do you make it go further. So, do we have any questions on that? Okay, here's my question stroke homework for you, because we're trainers, we insist on homework, right? At the moment, the leadership team, with some input, have come up with what they think are the best events to get people to. And I have to say, judging from the stories I'm hearing, they've got a pretty good track record. My question to you is, what events, if the church ran, could you get your friends, colleagues, families to? Because actually, maybe we should be running some of them. And the leadership team needs to plan it and make sure that you're not trying to do 7 events in the same week. Right? Because, that's not going to fly, clearly. But actually, what could the church do that you would be confident to be able to bring friends and family to who don't know Jesus yet? What does that event need to look like? What does that event need to involve? Is it musical? Is it social? Is it do you have a lot of friends that are picking your brains on how you raise kids or grandkids? Is it an alpha course? Is it if people are asking questions around how to become a Christian? Is it an alpha course? Is it a marriage course? Is it training on how to be a parent? Is it training on how to match your money? What is it that you could get people to? Think about that and then tell your leaders. And if you're really lucky, they won't know. They won't say to you, and can you organise it? They will say, that's a good idea. Would you like to help organise it? Right? And then you negotiate exactly what that looks like. Because we recognise that not everybody is gifted with an infinite amount of time. So, but if you're gifted in planning, if you're gifted in organising, please use your gift to make the rest of us look good. Oh, and yourself, really. But if you're an evangelist, this is the really important question. Evangelists generally have lots of networks and connections anyway. Start working out what people would come to. You can almost ask them. You'd be surprised the question you can make people answer if you ask them nicely. Hey, I'm looking at planning my church is stuff. What kind of event would we have to do to get you to actually walk through the door? What would we have to give away? Do we need to do a cake throwing competition? Would that appeal to you? A gâteau eating competition? I don't know. Just ask people. You'd be amazed. And people tell you the recipe. By the way, if you ask people that what they want, when you put it on, they're stuffed. Because they said that's what they wanted, and here's what we've got. And if you're telling them 6 months out, they can't accidentally be at their mum's that weekend because they saw it coming. The advantages of planning. So three models that Andy and I have been talking to your leadership team around, and we wanted to make sure that the broader church was beginning to get a handle on the thinking behind what we were doing, because it's important. So 5 Ps, plan, prepare, party, presentation, plug in. Snakes and ladders I won't go through again. And then 5 Es, entice, entrance, engagement, exit, enhance. Does that make sense? Yeah. So questions, comments, insults? Questions to me, insults to... No. Then I'm Roy.
One of the gaps still seems to be around the plugging.
Yep.
Events, I think we have a strong history of that in the church and that relational side. But the what next?
Yeah.
In terms of the going deeper into church life, helping people explore their faith, whether that's one-to-one, it seems to be alpha, and I know you shared with the leadership a few other ideas. Just any further thoughts on the kind of what next part, the plugging part?
Again, I think it's worth, if you're evangelists, it's worth chatting to people and go, would you come to a course about that kind of stuff? And if you do, would it be, and then the question is online or in person? So Alpha, I mean, you know, we're running, my church is on to its third or fourth Alpha course online, and we've been amazed at how successful they were. So far, we've seen somebody become a Christian on on each of those courses. None of them live anywhere near Halifax, which is where my church is. So, one in East London, one in Jerusalem, one in Scotland. Well, one was in the same county as us, which was an encouragement. But it's work. What do you think would work? So the broad categories, it's generally some kind of, it's either resources, because the number of people that become Christians by themselves, it's about a third, by the way. So if people are that way inclined, giving them books and resources and things to watch will help them. If they like to be in a room and learn stuff and talk about stuff, then the Alphas and my favourite Start course and a few other things work. And there's always we can give you some one-to-one stuff for you to be able to work through with people. But I guess, broadly speaking, those are the categories. I guess we are still at the point of beginning to get a feel for what will work here. And the best way that we can get a feel for what works in the centre of the universe that is Staplehurst is please talk to us. Ask your friends and family what will work. And then we'll try from that. But one of the things you have to bear in mind is that people's position on the snakes and ladders thing is not fixed. And if you're not offering things to go forwards, and you're not, if you can plateau people, the danger is people drop back because you're not. So even if you're offering the same, even if you just keep inviting them to the different events, that's a really good start. If you stop inviting events, they'll disappear. But at some point, you need to go. Come on. When we preach, when I do a gospel message these days, I offer people a big yes, become a Christian now, a little yes, come and find out more, and a healthy maybe, please keep an open mind and asking questions and come back to the next one of these we do. And I find that's really helpful rather than giving people a repent now or else. Doesn't give a good exit. Go away thinking, am I going to hell? What if I am hit by a bus? So just plug-ins hard because it's very contextual. Or what works for my friends might not work for yours. But find out. Ask people. Pray. Seek revelation. I've got a thumbs up from the back, so that's fine. Anything else? Questions, comments?
Just where you say present, these days, presumably you don't do echelons and things at the end of, the social events, it's social and then it's more personal.
You need to decide what the event is. So some events are we're just making friends. We're just getting people in the building and comfortable. I always think that's a slight missed opportunity. I'd like to put something in the mix. But a lot of it's how you do it. So if you noticed, Clive gently preached the gospel twice at the barn dance. Once before the break and once at the end. It doesn't need to be long, doesn't need to be complicated. Just needs to be, and it can be, have you thought about, depending on what the event is. It's important you pick the right message for the right thing. But outside of church, people's tolerance of public speaking is much lower than it used to be. Christians and students are the only people that listen to anybody give a long monologue anymore. But if you're a good speaker, it doesn't. If the event is good and you're a good speaker, you can get away with it. What I think people hate, and I hate, is that I've sat through this amazing concert, and then this idiot that's not very communicative, or even if he is communicative, gets up, talks about something entirely random for 5 minutes, which may or may not be a gospel presentation, or is the sales pitch on whatever, and then sits down, and then the host goes, "Thank you very much, go." A, rubbish exit. right? Rubbish exit, where actually you could have done that 20 minutes earlier. Do that thoughtfully, invite people to engage, and then bring the band back for 15 minutes, and then have people go out on the high of the music. So you be clever and understand. We're back to who are you trying to reach, and what type of event is it? If you're doing an event where everybody's almost a Christian, you absolutely better go for gold in a gospel presentation. If you're doing an event where you're just trying to get people connected to the family, to the bigger community, don't. Right? Understand your audience. Understand who it is that God's... Now, God will do amazing things, and there'll be exceptions to all of it. But, okay, sorry, that was a long answer to a short question. Anything else? I'm aware that people have got, chickens in ovens and things. Sometimes. I think one end of the evangelism spectrum is we just bless people because it's good for that. And step one for evangelism is recognizing that God's good and his people are okay. So there's a whole set of events around with that, and that's fine. But we're back to who are we getting through the door? So if you say to your neighbour, we've got this band at my church, come, it's free. That's not really a problem because it's your credibility on the line. If you're just advertising out there, people are looking for community, free events in this day and age. With the pressures on, a free event's good. But actually, if you're saying 15 quid for a ticket for a band, people think they're coming to a gig. And they are coming to a gig, but they're coming to a gig with a connection to it. So it's not as a straightforward question as it was. But most of the people that are going to come in are going to be coming in with having had some connection anyway, and then money's less of an issue. And if they're skint, you don't want to muddy the water. Right? If money's an issue, so if you can afford it, free's less problematic. But if you need to charge for something, but figure out a way of being able to help the people that you want come who are skint without feeling like they've had a handout or they've been embarrassed about a process, having been skint. And I'm a pastor, so I'm still not that greatly paid. But yeah, so anything else? One more question, maybe? Go in, gone. The Lord, oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, on your last point, nonsense is macro by have had a series of photo concepts by some very well-known artists. And they're paid events. Put the vicar there, praise. And as a Christian myself, it's just been very weird.
Yeah.
It's been weird. That's what I can describe it as, because you've got loads of people, obviously not Christians, go along to see this folk artist, and then the vicar literally just stands up and prays without any context from this extent. So I completely...
Yeah. Yeah, I think, weird's okay until people start to confuse weird and dangerous. So it needs to know what the event is, and then work from there. And if you've thought about it, you should avoid those awkward moments. But as a church, we're putting on a barn dance, so you don't mind if we say grace over the food. Great, just don't take half an hour over that prayer. Right? Lord, bless this bunch as they munch on the munch as their lunch is as good as you're going to get in that context. Make it fun, make it nice. Don't make it weird. In fact, one of the subtexts for most of this is don't be weird. So, but we have, because, Share Jesus events, we like to give the stuff away. I have a whole set of these. This is the long explanation of the 5 Ps. It's our missional toolkit training, effectively. You can have one of those. For the real planners amongst you, I have a copy of how how to run a community festival. You don't have to go actually run the community festival. There's some great planning tips and tricks in there. So please help yourself to those. Don't forget your prayer cards. Lord, help us be fruitful. Amen. Lord bless you real good. Thank you very much.